Welcome to the first episode of our AGON series, everyone. This series, we sat down with the director of projects at Evil Hat Productions, Sean Nittner, to cover AGON, and we had some amazing design discussions along the way.
Before we get into the episode, we do have a quick announcement about our format/release schedule. We are hoping to keep future episodes at a more manageable length. Right now, we sometimes have like an hour and 45 minutes or whatever. Like, they're pretty lengthy sometimes. And we also want to be able to make sure that we can have weekly content for you. So we are going to be breaking each series into 4 episodes. The actual breakdown of what goes into each episode is going to kind of depend on each game and how long different parts take. But we're hoping it makes it easier for new people to jump in, and it makes sure that you always have something in your feed. And, you know, obviously, most importantly, it gives Ryan more time to edit things.
Absolutely. So after the episode, join us for a little bit more about the change, our patron thank yous, and other normal closer stuff. With all of that out of the way, enjoy the show, everyone. Welcome to Character Creation Cast, a show where we discuss and create characters, the best part of role-playing games, with guests using their favorite systems. I'm one of your hosts, Ryan, and this episode, my co-host Amelia and I are excited to welcome Sean Nittner, the co-designer of the game we are covering in this month's series, AGON. AGON?
But
one of those is going to work.
However you like.
A game where you play as heroes of myth and legend, prove the glory of your name, and win your way back home.
Sean, welcome to Character Creation Cast. We're really glad you could join us today, even if we can't say the name of your game.
All good. Don't worry, you're not the only ones.
Can you tell us who you are, along with your pronouns, and what sorts of things you do, where people can find you, your entire life story, all of that?
Sure. When I was but a wee babe, my name's Sean Nittner. I use he, him pronouns. And the things that I'm probably most known for in the gaming space is that I'm the director of projects for Evil Hat Productions. I've been doing that since 2012. I started when we launched our Fate Core Kickstarter, which blew up far more than we ever expected. And I've been project managing almost every. I've had a few others that a few games that other people have managed, but I've been project managing just about every game that we've published since then. That means I do recruiting. I look for partners to co-publish games with. Folks like John Harper, who we co-published AGON with, that I also happen to co-write, but that's not the standard. Usually I just work as publisher. Behind me, you can see Deathmatch Island, which is a Paragon game based on AGON by Tim Dene, and that was a much more conventional. Found somebody who was creating a game and said, "Hey, would you like to publish that with us?" And then I step projects all the way through game development, editing, sensitivity reading, playtesting, proofreading, art direction, layout, printing, release to market, fulfillment, crowdfunding, etc. So I manage that whole process, and we've made some amazing games. We're super proud of. The other thing that folks might know me from is Big Bad Con, gaming convention in the Bay Area. I'm the steward, but soon to be steward emeritus. This will be my last year. After putting on cons for 20 years, I am stepping down from that, and I am delighted to transfer the stewardship to my successor, Ash Cheshire. They are they've been a part of the con since the start, and they're just they've been a board member for years and a staff member, and so they're incredibly well prepared to take over. But Big Bad Con is a community-focused indie gaming con in the Bay Area. We've been promoting marginalized creators since the get-go. We have a amazing scholarship. Last year, we're a 1,000-person con, and last year we were able to offer scholarships to over 100 people, which a 10% scholarship ratio is pretty much unheard of, and we're super proud of it. And so it's a great place to come and meet people, a great place to come and play a lot of great indie games. And it's been growing and growing. And we took a break for when the pandemic hit. We started an online track. So we now also have Big Bad Online, which just happened a few weeks ago. And so we now are doing that every year as well, because even though it started as a reaction to not being able to meet in person, the fact that we could have an online event where people from all over the world could attend and present was such a huge boon that we thought, well, we're not going to let go of this. So now we're running 2 events.
Absolutely.
Those are the primary things.
Just like a couple things that you're maybe doing here and there. Nothing.
A couple things. Yeah.
You might have heard of them.
I'm also a system administrator. Yeah. I work at UC Berkeley at Cal Performances, the performing arts department for UC Berkeley, and I keep our servers running and our card transactions safe and all that jazz. That's not really as known in the gaming space, but it does take up a time as well. Oh yeah. It's why I am stepping down, because 3 full-time jobs are too many full-time jobs.
What?
And yeah, in terms of finding me, I am a bit of a hermit these days. I'm off all social media as of about a year ago. And so you can find me on any of those various websites. My email address is seannittner@gmail.com. You can, I suppose you can try and poke me in other spaces, but generally speaking, I'm in several Discord servers related to our games, and good old-fashioned email is the best way to get in touch with me. Or at conventions. Absolutely. I'm at a lot of those.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, let's go ahead and get into this, and we can start by discussing what this game is all about.
Absolutely.
What's in a game?
So what is the core concept of AGON?
So imagine Odysseus about to set sail on his 10-year journey of trials and tribulations, brought to you by Fast and the Furious. AGON is meant to be a story of Greek heroes told with a modern sensibility. So we want high action. We want strong female and non-cis male protagonists. We want characters who you don't need as players to know a lot of Greek history or Greek mythology, but you have the vibe. Xena is a incredibly important touchstone for us, as I mentioned, a lot of more modern epic action adventure stories. Our characters are lost at sea, and they're trying to return home. Their goal is to get home, but the fickle gods are going to make that very difficult. And the only way that they're going to make it home is by filling up the vault of heaven, illuminating the vault of heaven, so that they can once again navigate by the stars. As they start, they're in a nebulous fog that has them lost at sea, and they arrive at various islands where there's trials and tribulations. And on these islands, as they do the will of the gods or not, as they earn either the favor or the wrath of the gods, the stars will illuminate, and eventually they will find their way home. Or their own personal star will burn out and fizzle. They'll push to the edge of their fate, and they'll be remembered only as a lost sailor, a lost nomad who never made it home. And there'll be stories told about them either way. This game is all about creating a legacy that people will remember. You have a very long and complex name, and that name only grows as the game. When the game ends, you add even more to that name because it is how you are known. So, steely-eyed Adrastos, the scion of Athena, might be how you start your name, but by the end of the game, it will be expanded with more epithets, with more titles, because that's, as we remember our Greek heroes, they all have dozens and dozens of names and aliases and references, and that we're inspired by that. So that's the core concept.
You mentioned kind of modernizing like some of those Greek stories. So what kind of setting are we working with? Are we making our own? Are we kind of setting it now? Could you play in ancient Greece if you wanted? How does all that work?
Yes. So the story is set in ancient Greece. However, we created all, the setting is built into the book. There are 12 islands that the heroes can venture to. It was very important to us that that running this game was very friendly to new players. So we have named the traditional role called the traditional GM role. We've named the Strife player, and we've tried to give the Strife player as few additional tasks as necessary to get the game running. Every island starts with an arrival challenge. When you arrive, there's something going on the heroes need to address, and the Strife player can literally just read that arrival challenge off to the players and ask, "What do you do?" And then there are several other trials that the Strife player can sort of pepper into the story, or that the hero players will naturally gravitate towards on their own. And so all of these are set on what would be Greek Isles, but all of them have been created afresh. So none of these are. Some of our stretch goals did use some traditional Greek names and locations, but we wanted to tell more queer stories, more gay stories, more a lot. Not that the Greek tragedies aren't full of beautiful stories. We absolutely love them, but the situations that we are presenting look at things like climate change and the abuses of power and things like that. And it's wrapped in a metaphor of Greek heroes, but we have lots of issues around status and around power and privilege that are brought to the fore in these islands. That said, before we even finished the game, John and I were already making hacks of it. And so there is a hack called Ride or Die, which is very much street racers or drift racers from various dimensions. We wanted to make it feel like Fast and the Furious, but also like let people bring their wildness to it. So one of the iconic drift racers is a dinosaur who somehow drives a car, right? So like these are that's really on the Gonzo side. We also made John made an homage to Battlestar Galactica. So instead of Greek heroes at sea or starfighters in space, very similar vibe.
Wow.
And I made because I can't ever get enough 90s cartoons, I made Surge Protectors, which is an homage to the Transformers, with a little hint of Gem and the Holograms built in. So yes, though the game is set in the Greek Isles, these are fictitious isles, and we specifically licensed the game so that it was very easy for people to create their own settings. You can make a few changes to the character sheet, a few changes to the way things are named, and jump immediately. Use the Paragon system to play these sort of heroes separated from their home in some way. Sometimes that's physically, like in AGON. Sometimes it's more metaphorical, like we have this important quest to go on. But it's very flexible in terms of the system. The core book stays focused on the Greek stories, but I think as you play them, you'll realize like, oh, these are not just lifted from the Bard, these aren't just lifted from the original stories. These are definitely our take on them.
That's awesome. As long as we can get like rowboats going over jumps, or anything like 100%.
That. Yes. Take your rowboats on a high wave, crash it into a dock. In fact, I think I have one. So there's a supplement in development called Realms of Chaos, which is essentially the Thor Ragnarok version. It's like you've sailed your ship into space, and now it's Space Agon. And I do actually have one realm, what we're calling them instead of islands. One realm that I wrote where you literally crash in. Yeah, the story starts as your ship is hurtling towards this realm and crashes into it, and you have to like. Hijinks ensue from there.
Absolutely.
So yes, flying rowboats, you got the drift.
Why not?
100%.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Well, what sort of tools do we need to actually play the game?
We keep it pretty light. There's a player kit that you can download off of agon-rpg.com or off the Evil Hat website. there is, I always encourage you to have the book itself in PDF or EPUB or physical format. And then you're going to have a set of polyhedrals. We use D4 to D12, and you'll want a big old stack of them. AGON is a game that lots of dice at the table. I like to have different colors for each hero player, so I walk around with a big bag of dice separated by color, and I kind of hand out a pile of several D4s, D6s, D8s, D10s, D12s to each player. That way, when they help each other and things like that, and they're handing each other dice, you can kind of see who's helped and how that's
nice.
affected. But yeah, it's a big old stack of dice, D4 to D12, and all the regular accoutrements. Print out your character sheets, or use them. If you're playing online, we have a great Roll20 character sheet. All character sheets on Roll20 are free, but we also have a module with all the islands that you can purchase if you want all the entire content out of the book. And I think a lot of other people have made like Google Sheet character keepers. So in person, it's dice, pencils, character sheets. Online, there's lots of different tools for it.
Friends,
Very
pizza,
cool.
Mountain Dew.
Yeah, I mean, yes.
I could really go for some pizza right now. I'm kind of hungry.
And now we break.
Yeah,
and now
right.
we have a short pizza break.
So in depth, because we've talked about it a little bit already. But what kind of stories and themes did you want people to engage with in this game? Because obviously everybody can tell whatever story they want to at the table, but the reason not everything is D&D is because we have different kinds of stories that we want to tell. So like, what were you hoping people would get out of this?
So there's a few things that we really want to focus on. One of them is a story of camaraderie that is formed through challenge and friction, and as a story of people who love and adore one another, but also are constantly sharpening their blades against each other. Mechanically, this is represented through the glory system. So when I, as a Strife player, tell you a challenge up ahead, the Serpent of Nemos is wrecking the city, and you see a tower falling, and everyone inside of it is going to perish. What do you do? And I say the challenge of this is I'm going to say this is a challenge of blood and valor, or I might say, oh no, it's more about finding a solution. Maybe I'll call it a challenge of craft and reason. But whatever I state the challenge is, I'm going to roll some dice. I'm going to get a challenge level. I'm going to say this is the challenge level, and then everyone has the option of saying, I, steely-eyed Adrastos, son of Athena, will rise to meet this challenge, and they'll all name themselves and say how they're going to meet the challenge. And whoever, as long as somebody rolls the challenge level or higher, they succeed. And they stop the horrible thing from happening. They accomplish their goal. That's great. But the person who rolls the highest amongst everybody is best. And when someone is best in the challenge, two things happen. One of them is that they get to narrate the final description. So we always narrate from lowest roll to highest. There are no ties. If you ever get a tie roll, you have a roll off. So there will always be someone who is best. So we'll narrate from lowest to highest. If someone has not met the challenge, we're going to watch them struggle and suffer. They're going to describe how their character was crushed under the rocks, or grappled the serpent, was flung aside, or saw somebody that they love hurt and fell into despair. They're going to describe their character suffering in some way. And then everybody who meet the challenge, they'll describe their character, how they saved people, how they distracted the serpent, how they help in some way. But the person who is best gets that final narration. They get the final button, and they can choose to sort of incorporate everything that people have said up to this point, and sort of build off their successes and say, only through our combined efforts we do this. Or they can say, yes, and these other mere mortals maybe assisted in some paltry ways, but I was the true hero.
And also
so
Steve was there.
And also, yeah, you were there. Yeah. So they can position themselves however they like. And then finally, they're the ones who get the lion's share of the glory. So if this challenge was difficulty, if the challenge rating of this is 11, that means whoever is best is going to get 11 glory. Everyone else who won is going to get half that rounded up, so they're going to get 6 glory. And everyone who fought in the challenge but suffered is just going to get a single glory because they tried. They were there, and it's still glorious even to be in these climactic events, even if you cannot prevail. So so there's this friction of sometimes a challenge is like not that hard. I don't roll particularly well. But you as the player, like really, really want to be the one to get the glory, or you want to be the one to describe it. And so it's not even, at some point, it becomes much less about, can I beat the GM? It's, can I beat my fellow heroes, right? As you watch everyone, as you say as I keep saying all these names, I'm like, I am, I am far seeing Nadja of Scion of the Sweeping Isles, and as you're saying all these things, like I'm far seeing, and you pick up my far seeing dice. You say you say your name, and you pick up your name die. You say the domain that you're in. You pick up the domain die for the challenge that you're in. As you're picking up all these dice, you might also say, I'm getting divine favor from Zeus, who can grant me authority in the situation. You're picking up all these dice and you're putting them in your hand, and everybody rolls at once. And so you're sort of watching people build their die pool. And that gives you a sense of like how far in someone is going. Like, are you going all in? Are you trying to like real? And then other people will be like, yes, I am also showing the ferocity of Ares, and I'm using my limited resource, mind you. These are not indefinite, right? These are limited resources. So I'm choosing to send that resource because to me, it's important that I'm best in this challenge. And then on the flip side, you have the option saying, I'm supporting you. I'm going to lend you my die. And instead of me rolling, I'm going to grant you support, and I'm going to gain a boon. I'm going to have a bond with you, which I can use later on for various things. But in this case, I'm really trying to help you shine. Yes, you're going to get one of my dice, and I'm going to get a little bit of glory, but I'm not in the contest proper. I'm going to watch you do this thing. So we have this option of being like, do we all work together? We'll support somebody for them to win, or are we all fighting? And it goes back and forth. There's not one. It's not. You can have some groups where they're like, oh yeah, this is totally your thing. We're going to let you have this. And then 2 challenges later or 2 conflicts later, like, no, I want in on this. This is important to me. I want the glory. I want the button on top. And so one of those is like how we build relationships based on the friction between the characters. They are not at odds, but they're not also. But there is a sense of the best of a great. As we sail out on these wine dark waters into fates unknown, into this mystical fog, we all size each other up and regard each other as true heroes, but we still want to be the most renowned, have our name be the most known. And the more glory you get, the bigger your name die gets. So the better you get at all these challenges, as your glory grows, so does your name. And also when your character finally meets their end, the size of their name die determines how long they will be remembered. And so will you be remembered for a generation? Will you be remembered for a millennia? Or will you be remembered even when the sun goes dark, right? Like, how long will your story live on? So these are like very important decisions that you're making, like at every conflict, like what matters to me most right now? So that's one big theme of it. The other important theme for us is that each of these islands sort of is our attempt, or is our chance to represent a challenge that is at once alien to the characters. There are these heroes that are just arriving, but they're known. People know who they are. They're already renowned. So they are strangers to the situation, but they're not strangers to the people. They are considered to be part of the community already. And so what we don't want is a bunch of kind of white savior stories where you go in, people have problems, you fix them and go away, and everybody's locked up. Like, these characters immediately become immersed. They have knowledge of the people there, the people have knowledge of them, and they'll be remembered. And somehow, magically, mystically, inexplicably, they'll be remembered across various isles. So if they really like kind of do someone wrong on one island, it's not a game where you're like, well, in that dungeon, we just burned it all down.
Guess we'll never go back to that town again.
Guess we'll never go back to that town. People remember. In fact, one of the things you can carry away is, humiliation, being hated by the very people. You can also gain the wrath of the gods. So these things accrue and accumulate, and your characters are accountable for their actions, and they are big damn heroes, but they're also a part of a community, and we want to see them how they foster those things, whether they really do just look out for themselves or whether they think about those around them and how they're affected. So those are, you know, two that sort of camaraderie challenged by friction and strife, the stepping up to the challenge, and the like accepting of those consequences, and realizing that those will stick with you.
Very cool.
Now I remember why I really liked this game, Ryan. Because remember, I was like, I have sticky notes in this book, so like I read it and I know that like, but like clearly this is one of those like memories that I lost in all of my my ECT treatments, because I was like, clearly, like I've got little sticky notes on things in the book. Yeah. And now I remember.
That was
absolutely.
That was the first time I got Apocalypse World, the first edition by Megan Vincent Baker. I broke the spine because I'd been reading it and putting sticky notes in and making notes, and I eventually like the spine cracked on me, and I was taping it together. And,
literally game changing.
Literally, absolutely, phenomenal.
I was an Ennie's judge a couple years ago, so this was submitted, and I'll be honest, I don't remember. I think we nominated it. I don't remember.
Oh, thank you.
Maybe didn't.
I'm pretty sure I saw it on the nomination list. I don't remember.
I believe it was nommed, but it's not in the book.
I remember we liked it. We discussed it several times.
Yeah, it's a deceptively simple system. We feel that we've built a lot of nuance into what looks on the surface like a very simple mechanic.
Yeah, I mean,
absolutely.
Someone who really loves intra-party conflict. Like that's a thing that always is fun for me. And I've slowly dragged Ryan into this side of things with me over the course of our podcasting careers. But I love that sort of, you know, like especially in this game, that it's not necessarily like, you know, conflict, all that, but there is that chance to just like some messiness, you know, for people to be a little bit dramatic and, you know, in conflict sometimes, because I think we get really interesting stories out of that.
I think so too. And we don't always seem eye to eye about our goal. One thing the game forces you to do is have a single conflict at a time. And so if somebody's like, I want to sneak into the palace, and someone is like, I want to confront the prince, I turn to the leader as a strife player, turn to the leader and say, what are you going to do? At the beginning of every island, there's a challenge for who's going to be leader of that island. And sometimes, again, people go all in on that challenge because like, I want the final say. But I mentioned earlier, when you support somebody, you get a bond with them. There's several other ways to get bonds with people. One thing you can do is you can spend a bond to take leadership in a moment. So some leaders like, we're going to go face the prince. And you're like, no, I need to find out what his priests are doing first. And so you're like, I'm spending this bond with you. And you're like, I know, Adrastos, that we have fought in wars together. We have done all this together. I need you to listen to me now. We're sneaking into the temple instead. And it's,
I love that little bit of gambling,
really powerful moment
that like is going on too. Of like, am I going to spend this little chit that I have with you to like, you know, like, am I going to use these points to really increase my bet on this situation?
Important enough to me?
It's I love it. I love it.
It's so good. It's so good.
Very glad.
So we talked a lot about what characters do in the game. It sounds like the play is we build these pools, we roll all the dice together, and then narrative stuff happens afterwards, right? Once we get the results and line things up.
Yeah, so the basic unit of the game is the conflict. We definitely want to see our characters in conflict, and so just a step. I think you've got it, but I'll formalize the process, just so that listeners will have the whole thing. The strife player will tell you what domain the conflict is, and they'll say, okay, the senators are debating in the forum, and they don't care about the hunger and the plight of the people on Soros, because Ion is on Ion, because the people of Soros have everything they need, so they don't care that their sister island is starving. they're planning to disregard your pleas to send aid. This is a challenge of arts narration. So we'll specify what the challenge is, and then as a Strife player, I'm going to roll a bunch of dice, and I can break that down a little bit. But I'm going to roll my dice. I'm going to take my highest die, and I'm going to add it to the Strife level on the island, and that's going to be the challenge. And then I'm going to say who will face this challenge, and every hero will either step up and say I, and they will name themselves and describe their epithet if it applies, give us their history, and they'll step up to challenge, and they'll grab a bunch of dice, and they just hold on to them. They don't roll them yet. If you're doing it online, you kind of build your die pool, but you don't click roll. Or they'll say that I'm going to assist someone, I'm going to support someone, and they'll support it. Or every once in a while, someone's just like, nope, I won't be in this challenge at all. This is not my beef. And that's a real distinct decision, because every time you're in a challenge, you're going to get glory. Every time, you want to be in the challenges. They're incentivized as being in them. But sometimes people will refrain. So once you've said who you're going to, once you said who's going to be in the challenge, everyone who's in the challenge is taking that die pool. They haven't narrated their action yet. They haven't described everything, but they've put dice from various things, from their epithet, from other domains if they want, by spending pathos, which we can get into in a moment. But they'll kind of build this die pool. They'll throw all the dice, and then they'll take their top 2 dice, add them together, and that's their total. There is a few ways with divine favor to augment that, but that's the basic concept. And then we'll do that narration as I described earlier, from lowest to highest. And that's when it's incumbent upon you as the player to be like, oh, I said I'm far-eyed. That's my epithet. It's now my responsibility to describe how my far-seeing, like, I see off on the edge, I see off in the distance, an archer on a boulder, and I dive to protect the prince, the senator, before the arrow is shot that would have slain them, and that's how I gain the regard of all of these collected few.
Stuff like that. My brother runs games for his group of friends, and he was playing a game at one point that, like, it was written into the rules that is like, you can use whatever skill you want as long as you can tell me how it applies to this situation. He's saying that, like, he actually ended up house ruling that into almost all of his games, because he said for him as the GM running the game, it's hilarious to watch his players sort of do this mental gymnastics of like, well, actually my baking skill is applicable here because, and so I love I block the arrow. Right? Like, I love any game that lets you be like, okay, tell me, you can use it, but tell me why it's important. And then like the play, because it comes to like, you end up with such cool and like, sometimes silly and memorable story moments too, that it's like, oh, I've applied this thing in this weird way that like, it just brings so much joy to me to watch people be like, well, actually I can do, it's so fun because people get so creative with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you, I think, one of my most memorable bakery scenes, is Michelle Yeoh Win Chun, when she's got the tofu and she keeps throwing it up and like doing all these crazy martial arts and then catching it again, and then guys keep diving in, and she has to keep she has to keep setting the tofu because the tray will get knocked over. Not quite baking, but the cooking competition meets martial arts. Yeah, that's choice stuff right there. That's
it's so good.
Some of her best moves were holding that tray of tofu.
That's amazing.
We do. So in this case, along those lines, each contest has a specific domain. Like I say, this is a challenge of arts narration. And while you can bring your epithet in any way you can describe it, you can also say, I'm going to spend pathos, my sort of personal reserve, and to bring in another domain. So if you're like really, really good at resolve and spirit, you might say, I'm going to spend pathos, and I'm going to call upon the gods to witness me and gain the attention of the heavens that I am important enough that you shall listen. And I'm going to add my resolve and spirit die in addition to the arts narration die that I started with for this challenge, because it's a bigger die, or I just want to have more in my pool. So yes, we absolutely say, let us know how you bring those things to the fore. And if you decide to bring blood and valor into what otherwise would be talkie situation, or if you decide to use craft and reason and like sneak around, it also changes the tenor of the conflict too. It's not like it mechanically it breaks anything, but the outcomes may be different in terms of like how people regard you, what it looks like. I mean, do you straight up challenge someone to a fight? Do you slay somebody in cold blood? All of these things affect the world and affect how the scenes roll out. So also seeing how people bring in those things is keeps twisting and turning the story, which is delightful.
Is there a lot of back and forth with the Strife player and the heroes like during these narrations, or is it a lot of yes ending from each hero to each hero?
It's very little back and in our platonic goal of this. In our platonic goal of this, once you've started playing, we love fast conflict resolution, and we love for people to. There's this invisible body language that happens where I, as a Strife player, tell you the callous centers of Soros don't care about the plight of the people on Ion, and they're going to go without food. To change the minds is a challenge of arts narration. And then people will say, I'm in. But the actual that's where discussion stops, right? That's where we say don't tell me how you're approaching the senators. Don't it's very natural. A lot of games have you describe before you roll the dice, which we totally get. Like I said, we've had many iterations of this game as we're developing it, and we wanted those dice to have a feeling of finality. There's no rerolls. We initially had reroll. You could spend Divine Favor to reroll dice. There's no rerolls. There's no adding dice after the fact. It's everybody decides how, because it's a gamble. This is a risk of both challenging the Strife player and your fellow players. So you've got to decide beforehand. So you do this kind of side-eyeing each other, are you going all in? And you hear what people are saying. You're like, people are describing their various epithets and whatnot, but you can't necessarily catch it all. You might just be watching them as you see them picking up dice, but you might also just be doing this internal calculation of how important is this to me? And then you all hold the dice, and then you all roll at once.
And there's one player wearing sunglasses, leaning back in their chair, you don't know what they're thinking about, just straight faced.
John is an incredible poker player. John is very, very skilled at playing poker, and there was that poker sensibilities of that one person just going to sit there and give you put with the total poker face that I don't find people ever do that. People are like, oh yeah. People really show their interest, but there is definitely a level of do I care?
It almost feels like the dice is the ante, right?
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah,
that's amazing.
Up because you're spending finite resources that you will run out of to build that pool. So when you go all in, that's great. You might win the challenge, but then maybe you went overboard because it's not the amount of glory you get is just based on what the Strife player rolled. So if I get an 11 and you roll a 26, you don't get 26 glory. You get 11 glory. So the only reason to get a 26 is if someone else got a 25, right? That's the only reason why you want to roll that high. So you are trying to beat the Strife player, beat the other players, but preferably not by that much, but the dice. So you can't really, so you're playing this mental math game as you're doing this. And I mean, we're talking about, that's why it's only D4 to D12. We don't include D20 because it is too swingy. So you're not, and you're only picking your top 2 dice. So we're not talking about these huge things, but Divine Favor, which is always D4s, are added to the total. They're the one thing that's if literally the skies part and Artemis's arrow comes flying down from the skies to slay my foes, that's when you add the D4 on top. So, the highest you can roll is 2 12s on a D12. You get and then you get one, and then all your Divine Favor is added, but it's only the highest D4 that's added, even that. So the highest you can roll is, if I can do math, is a 28. The highest the Strife player can roll is much lower than that. They don't have those things. So it's really, do you want to try and get to this incredible level? Maybe if it really matters to you to win this contest.
This has real Price is Right vibes.
Hedging your bets. Yeah.
It is.
It's closest without going
really cool
over.
Because right, exactly.
Right.
Yeah, but I can see those big numbers really swinging the narrative too.
Absolutely.
I rolled a 27. I'm doing something really epic.
Yeah.
This is going to be amazing.
You at that point, you are the best. And so you describe yourself really as off the walls as you want, with the exception that you have to incorporate sometimes, we don't, I don't think any table plays this incredibly strictly, but if you rolled that entirely high roll, that probably means you spent pathos to bring in other domains. Yeah. You might have brought in divine favor, all these things. So now you should describe how those things happen.
Yeah.
But to answer that, but this is a very long-winded way of answering that question. Is there a lot of back and forth? No. We try to have a minimal back and forth. It is, here's the situation. We get to the point of conflict where we realize dice, we're going to play it out. We're going to have the heroes go and talk to the senators or try and, talk to the giant that's going to crush the peasant's apple cart, or do whatever get into it. But as soon as we're at that moment of indecision, I say, here's the challenge. And there really isn't at that point a lot of talk until we are narrating our outcomes. So there is some uncertainty by design.
Yeah. I like that because it feels like with these rules, having never played the game, but kind of being able to kind of parse what the rules are doing a bit, it feels like it gives you that anxious sort of pre-battle, pre-strife energy as a player yourself. It feels like that these gambles are giving you that sort of hype sort of feeling.
We really want people holding those dice as they're shaking them, being like, come on, come on.
There's something viscerally pleasing about a dice pool. More games need dice pool. I appreciate the roll 2d6 thing, but just the
and different sizes and shapes of dice.
Absolutely.
It's swingy and it's
yeah.
It just it tickles something in my brain.
Yeah. When you play a character, you have an option of choosing someone who's a demigod, and you're like, yeah, I'm son of Hades. Great. Well, when you do that, you get a bond with Hades. So you get a bond with your god. And so normally when you spend a bond you have with somebody, you can spend it to take over leadership, as I said before, or you can spend it to get their support, to get their aid. And that aid can come in the form of preventing you from taking harm. So you might, as you fail a contest, you might have to mark pathos. You might have to represent your harm. You might have to lose divine favor, representing your sort of expending your currency with the gods. So you can spend a bond to have somebody negate that harm. They block for you. You can spend it to have someone follow your lead, or you can spend it to add their name die to your roll. So us heroes, to start with D6 name dice, little D6s. A god has a D12 name die. So you have a bond with Hades, and you're like, Hades, help me now,
hey,
right?
Pal.
Yeah. And you're like, I'm picking up that big old honking D12 and I'm putting it in my die pool. And that's a finite currency. You only have so many bonds with them.
Very Xeno, the Warrior Princess.
Very Xeno.
My gosh.
We talked about Xena and Ares fighting probably a dozen times during the creation of this game, because we said, I want the gods to exist both as metaphors, concepts, higher powers, divinities, something far, far away, celestial entities, and as people walking around doing dumb stuff too.
Just handsome dude with a sword, right?
Handsome dude with a sword, right? So we many times do the gods have stats? Like when you give a god a stat, you have essentially said the god can be defeated, right? If it has a stat, it can be defeated. So yes, every once in a while we don't do this often, but every once in a while in the islands, you'll see a god with a stat next to them. That's very intentional, because it's if you want to, yeah. Now, are you going to slay the god? No, you're going to defeat them in their mortal form, right? There's a lot of foes in this game that you cannot actually permanently defeat without going into the larger battle mechanic, which happens at the end of the adventure, where you're like, okay, most conflicts can address a lot of things, but if you want to resolve this major thing, you need to do a battle. And furthermore, some battles really, or some contests for that matter, really push you to extend yourself and burn up your quiescence, propel yourself closer to your final end. And you have to mark fate, which is fate is a hit point track that never clears. You mark it and you never unclear it. And when you mark your final point of fate, your character story is over. But it's also how you advance. When you mark fate, that's how you get your stats to raise. So you're like, ooh, the more fate I spend, the more powerful I become. But the more fate I spend, the closer I am to my character's end. Yeah. So you can push your fate and to challenge these gods. And so there is a sense that we do want that moment where Xena can actually best Ares in a sword duel. Yeah. And at the same time, we can have the gods above looking in their scrying pools, like with the mortals from a distance. Like they exist in both worlds. And we tease that out. We don't full on put stat blocks for the gods in there, but we also do sprinkle them in various places.
Use sparingly.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like salt. So
this is always kind of a weird question to ask, especially after we've talked so much about all of the other things. But I sort of, especially when we have designers on, like to ask it in this way. The question we have in our outline is what makes this game unique. But for me, particularly with designers, I like to ask, what made you feel like this was a game you needed to make? That like this wasn't something that existed and you needed it to be in the world?
It's a bit of a long story, but
AGON,
the game that we're talking about right now, the game that we're talking about right now is AGON 2nd Edition. AGON 1st Edition was written by John Harper, my co-author. So he wrote 1st Edition on his own. We wrote 2nd Edition together. AGON 1st Edition was written by John Harper. There was a small game store in Oakland called Endgame, which is no longer with us. R.I.P. Endgame. We loved you. And they had these indie game nights, and an amazing GM, Carl Rigney, who I still love and adore to this day, was running AGON 1st Edition. And I played in it with this amazing player, Karen 12s. It was the first time we met, the first time we played a game together. We both played these giant big damn heroes that were stacking up glory and constantly at each other's throats. And fast forward many years later, Karen and I have now been married 10 years. She is the light of my life. She is so, we do so many, we play tons of games together. She is an amazing editor. She is an improv coach. She wrote Improv for Gamers. She's incredible, but AGON was the way we met.
Amazing.
And later on, our very first date also happened years later after a game at Endgame. And so that place, that game, that story has always been very close to our heart. John is a very good friend of mine. We've been, since the very first time I played a game of Apocalypse World, also run by Carl Rigney. It's a small world. I posted on my live journal, because at the time, live journal was the place you did those things. And John commented, like, yeah, I think that's totally cool. And I started talking to him back and forth online. And then we started talking about AGON, and we eventually became very good friends. We published Blades in the Dark together. We worked on AGON together. But AGON is the game that, he wrote in that same space, and that's when we started talking. So my friendship with John really grew out of playing AGON and other games of its ilk at the time, and went from online to in person to very, very good friends. And we had published Blades in the Dark, and John had this back catalog of games that he had made, and we said, would you want to consider looking at any of those things? And we were talking about AGON, and he said, I really liked what AGON did in its time, but there were a lot of things in first edition, like battles really, really were very, very slow and clunky, and often kind of got like hung up in technicalities. There were lots of parts. Second and first edition are dramatically different. You will see a lot of similarities in concept, but in execution, they're very, very, very different. And there was elements of it that he was really unsatisfied with, that were great at their time in 2006, but just didn't kind of meet our modern sensibilities. Yeah. And and he was looking at addressing those. And I was like, well, AGON is, for all the reasons I said, is incredibly near and dear to my heart. At the time, I didn't really have time to dive into it. And so we hired Jason Morningstar, creator of Fiasco, Great Ranks,
lots of
Shovel
excellent
Roach,
games. Yeah.
Amazing games. And we said, Jason, we would like to do a second edition of AGON, and we would like these 12 things changed. And he was like, cool, I can do that. He wrote us a second edition. He changed those 12 things, and we looked at it and we're like, we were wrong. Because he made incremental shifts in things in ways that when we played, we're like, you did exactly what we asked you to do. You wrote the spec. He wrote amazing things, and we did pull quite a bit of his material. Like there's a lot of his islands and whatnot that we pulled from. The island Vrachoi was actually originally Peristeroi Vrachoi, which I thought was too long to say. It's a real island.
Mouthful.
It's a real mouthful as well. So I shortened it down to Vrachoi, but the conflict on it, I kept. The central concept of it, I kept. And so Jason had done this amazing revision, and it was really like first edition refined and improved. But we're like, we want to go further. We really want this game. We want a single die roll, no re-rolling, no back and forth. We want one die roll to spell your fate. And we had so many things and that's why this game's had so many iterations. So at that point, we looked at it and said, we could publish this as is, but it doesn't mean, we didn't realize until we got it and played it that we wanted to do more. Yeah. And he was like, well, I've completed my writing spec. And we're like, yes, you have. That's great. We're going to take it from here. And so at that point it was, who's going to work on it? And John was working on lots of other projects as well. And I had been doing so much playtesting with John as we were like looking at Jason's version, and I was running a bunch of games, and I was very excited about it. And John finally was like, it seems like you're really into this. And I'm like, I really am. I'm really loving it. It's like, do you want to do this with me? And I was like, yeah, let's do it. So it was a love of the game. It was a connection to all these amazing people. It was play testing it and realizing like we wanted to do more. And I really wanted this story of these calibrating that tension between the hero players of like, when are you working together and when are you fighting against each other, or when are you trying to do better? Like that was also really important, because what we wanted was a table full of like strong camaraderie, not a table full of like, oh, you stabbed me in the back. You know, this is not a game where we want the heroes to be constantly infighting. We wanted them to be constantly gaining regard for one another.
Yeah, it's a friendly rivalry, much more than a
exactly.
It's like a Legolas and Gimli sort of feel to
it.
Exactly. Right? Yes.
That is a perfect analogy.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, even to the point of like counting glory, right? It's pretty similar. It's like, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, there was a whole confluence of events that made me really want to deliver the story. And there's a part of character creation, again, that we ended up taking out, that I will talk about how we snuck it back in another way, that was so delightful to me. I always loved it. And that really, I loved us telling our stories from before the game. So yeah, there was just lots of elements of the game that I wanted to hold on to, and I was playing it so much, I was so into it that it made natural sense for me to jump in and finish it up.
I know cool.
And then we made 12 games, and we finally ended up on this.
Finally one iteration. I know we've talked about it on this show a couple of times, but you know, like when you have a game that you really love and you've played it a lot and you run it and you know all of that kind of stuff, you really are sort of the best person to see all of the things that aren't working as well, because you really dug into it. And so like we've talked about for Ryan, that is like a lot of the like Palladium games. For me, it's Legend of the Five Rings. But it's a game, it's like you love so deeply in your heart, and you're like, this is an amazing game. It needs a lot of things fixed. You know, like you're like, I see all the ways that this could be even better. And like, and so I think a lot of times it does take people who really, really love something to be the ones to be like, but it could be better. You know, like those are the best
let's
people
take it
to
the
like
next level.
quote unquote fix those games.
Yeah.
It seems like you were in like that sweet
times.
spot for this.
I think so. We had several times where I was like, I took it to a con. I was like, John, we got it. We nailed it. This game was perfect. It's dialed in. We did it exactly. Let's send you to the printer. And he's like, cool. And then he ran it for somebody. He's like, but this happened. And I was like, that would never happen. He's like, it happened in my game. And I'm like, damn it. Okay, let's rethink this. And then
No.
it was funny because our like version 11, I think, we thought we had this brilliant epiphany, and we ran a game, and it was the worst we had run the whole time. Or I ran a game. It was the worst I'd run the whole time. And John was there. He wasn't in the game, but he was at the convention. And so I was like, hey, can you come in? Because I'm playing with these like very experienced gamers, these people who really, really like, they're giving really good critique. Are you free? And he's like, yeah, hold on. He came over. We sat in this room. It was this weird like fishbowl room with glass walls. At Seattle University. And so we're sitting in this room, and I can see everybody outside of us. It's kind of no one was looking at us, but it did feel a little weird.
Yeah.
And we had like a 2.5 hour conversation as we talked almost as long as we played the game about like what wasn't working and why. And that was what led to version 12 that finally led to version 13, which is the one that we ended up printing out. But like, it was so funny how we got so close and then just nosedived, made something that didn't work at all, but then learned so much from that that it got us very close to our final result. So it was, it's really funny to play through so many iterations of a game and realize like, oh, I did like that part of it. It didn't end up working, but I liked it.
Yeah, there's cool idea.
Yeah. Maybe you jot it down in a notebook. Maybe you'll use it in another game. Maybe
absolutely. So through all of these iterations, how long did it take from like start to finish? When did you start the process of working on the second edition?
Oh, I should probably have pulled up my Gantt chart for this so I could tell you. Okay, we started early 2017.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
And it came out in 2022, 2021.
And it came out in 2020. So that's our typical 3 year. Yeah. That's basically our normal Evil Hat. Whenever someone comes to us and they say, I've got a game, we're like, cool, it'll take 3 years to finish it. And they're like, but it's done. We're like,
is it though?
And 3 years we'll print it. Because we need to play test it. We need to edit it. We need to proofread it. We need to do sensitivity reading. We need to do layout. We need to do art. We were
done 12 times with this game.
Right?
Oh yeah. No, and that's the thing is that it was 3 years and we were working like we were possessed. I mean, it was, we were playing this game all the time. We were iterating and iterating. I would run it, John would run it. We'd come back, we'd share notes, we'd run it for each other. I mean, some of my very favorite games of AGON were played during this time when there was a weekend retreat where I went up to Seattle, and it was like, John, Allison Arth, and Andy Karashen, the four of us, I was like, we're going to play 6 games of AGON this weekend. We did not play 6 now. I think we played 3. But we had we played and we had these great discussions afterwards, and we were watching how people interact with the character sheet and how people interact with the dice. And like, so we'd play a game and then we'd all go out to eat, and John and I would just be like, okay, what about this? I like this. I didn't like that. And then John, because he's an absolute layout god, would like make changes to the character sheet, and then we'd play another, print it out and play another game. And we rotated, him jamming, me jamming. And like, we ran this game like nothing, like I've never run other games. Like I was just a fever dream of just running it. So it was 3 years, but it was 3 intense years, or at least it was filled with intense pockets. The entire process wasn't like that. Once we got to editing and all those things slowed down a lot. But during the development cycle, it was a lot of iterations and a lot of play to test those iterations.
So,
that's so cool.
Through doing all of those iterations, like every time you sit down to play test it and you're like, something is just like not, like something is not well oiled here and not working. Did you feel each time were you like, oh, I thought we had it? Or like, did you come out of your play testing being like, okay, next thing, like I've got an idea. I've got like, because I could just see that like going through 13 iterations of something, that's a lot. And it's, like I could see that getting frustrated, but I can also see like, depending on how that playtesting process goes, coming away from each one being like, okay, I've got you know, like I know where
Yeah.
it didn't work and, you know, I'm excited to fix it.
Imagine a bicycle pedal. That was our experience. It was like
Yeah.
one playtest be like, yeah, we got it. It's great. Next one, like,
We
oh
know.
God, no, I found a problem. Oh yeah, we got it now. Oh God, I found a problem. And
Yeah.
I would not say that there was any sort of linear passage. It wasn't like we're steadily improving. We definitely had things that we dropped out and then we brought them back in again. There were a few things like the return home used to just be like one big track. And I was like, John, we have everything else named. I don't want to just have a big like track where you just check boxes. Like, I want to have stars in the sky. And so John made the Vault of Heaven, which is like, oh, for each god, they each have 3 stars in the sky. And then once you fill those in because you've gained their boom, that's how you get yourself home. So we had some things that were like, oh, Epiphany, we're sticking with that. We're never changing it. And other things just kept changing. Divine Favor kept changing. Demigods versus Mortals kept changing. The way the die pools were assembled kept changing. Strife kept changing. And yeah, we keep thinking we had it. And then it's like the chain slipped and like, oh no, didn't work. And it wasn't, you know, the final version that we released is basically when we had been like, oh wow, we've done lots of playtesting and then we keep getting that high note. We keep being like, yes, it did it. Yes, it did it. Yes, it did it. Okay. Now we can finally say it wasn't 1 good, 1 bad, 2 good, 1 bad. You know, it was 3 good, 4 good, 5 good.
Yeah.
And when they weren't good, it wasn't like oh, the system fails. Like, you know, sometimes games aren't fantastic, but we definitely had this moment where like we've hit a stride. We keep doing it. But until then, yeah, I thought we had it so many times.
Yeah.
I thought we were done. And I mean, honestly, when Jason turned in his draft, I was like, oh, this is so cool. I was like, this is great. And then we ran it. And it was like, we wanted a session to be an island. We wanted you to sit down for 4 hours and play through an island. And we played a session and we had barely scratched the surface of the island. And we're like, oh yeah, we're like, this is cool. Like, it's not that I'm not having fun doing these things. We just wanted it to move faster.
Like, this is the extended edition and I only have a couple hours. I think that's
we really want this game to be a game.
Yeah. I think it's a really interesting point, though, about it not being linear, because I think a lot of us think of it's like, oh, I started working on the game, then I added a little more and I added a little more and I added a little, like, and now, you know, like each time it's going smoother. But, you know, you point out that you change different things and it's like, well, if you take this thing out here, then suddenly you find out this other thing over here didn't work anymore. But I've added this thing, but now it doesn't connect over here. And you know, like, so constantly adding things in, taking them out, putting them back, that like, I can see how that would kind of go up and down. And I think that's a really important thing for people to keep in mind when they're designing is that it isn't, you know, sometimes like a thing's going to work great one time and not another, or something sounds like a great idea, but it just isn't right for this, you know?
Yeah. One great example of that was we used to have the ability to spend Divine Favor for all sorts of different things. And one of the things was you could explode a die who had hit its highest roll. And then if that die hit its highest roll, you could keep it exploding it. And it only cost 1 Divine Favor to do that. So it was like, if you rolled a 6 on a D6 and 8 on a D8, yeah, just spend Divine Favor. Absolutely. And there was this moment, a really critical, pinnacle moment where I had rolled this very high success. And a hero was like, oh, and they spent all this Divine Favor to beat me. They had to add extra dice and finally get one of those to roll really well and then explode that. They spent all this Divine Favor. And I was just staring at this 1 8 on my die, on a D8. I was just staring at this 8 and they were just spending and spending and spending. They finally beat me. You know, this is back when we had this back and forth. Now it's just one roll done. Yeah. But then it was like, you could spend it after the favor. And they finally beat me like, I did it. And I'm like, cool. I spend 1 Divine Favor. I explode my D8. I rolled another 8. I automatically got to explode that. I rolled a 7. I was like, I just added 15 to my roll. And they were just like, there was no way they were going to touch. Like they had just barely gotten over. And I just suddenly exceeded my roll by 15. And like, and it was just such a demoralizing thing because I'm like, there's
like,
as a strength player, I'm supposed to challenge you.
Yeah.
There's no reason I shouldn't do this, but the fact that the game allows me to do it isn't fun. And we walked away and I was like, John, I don't think we should have, you know, at first it was like, I don't think Strife players should be able to do it. And then it was like, well, if Strife players can't do it, then if the heroes can do it, it's going to be too unbalanced. Like we went back and forth and back and forth, but that was just one of those things where like, man, you really felt like you fought hard for that victory. And then I snatched it out from underneath you with like basically
blind luck,
no effort. Like blind luck. Like I basically had to spend like, you spent all these resources. I barely spent any. And it was just like, I just plastered them. And it felt bad to me too. I was like, I don't like this. Like, but also like as a Strife player, I'm supposed to be challenging you. So so that was one of those moments where we're like, this seemed really good when it happens one way. I think a lot of people, when they're talking about like high level D&D play, I saw Matt Colville talking about this, about high level D&D play, where he's like, all those spells like Force Cage and Teleport and all those things that like kind of just like give auto wins to players are really cool for a player when they do it. Like, yay, I just defeated this contest. But one, it's really defeating for the GM, who's like, man, I made this whole horrible, huge encounter and you just negated it in one roll. Yeah. And it's even worse when the GM does it to them. Like, oh, you're a barbarian who wants to be in this fight. I just force caged you and now you can do nothing for the entire fight. And you have to sit there for an hour while your friends do fun things and you can't do anything. Yeah. And both of those kind of things, those like game breaky sort of things, just like aren't fun. And so it's when we hit those edges, where we hit those spaces where we're like, oh yeah, this pushes the game into a space that isn't fun anymore. But like, let's go back to the drawing board. Let's try again, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Call to action.
Yeah, like that. I really enjoyed our initial discussion in this episode. I know a lot of it kind of will come back around to when we get to the discussion portion of the show.
Absolutely, yeah.
But I thought that this was a really interesting look at how games get made. And it's one of the things that I love when we have designers on our episodes, and we've talked about that a lot. But like, it was such a, such an interesting dive, and like Sean was so excited to talk about all of it too, and like just gave so much insight that even in like the 6 years of doing this or whatever, I think there were a lot of things that we haven't really gotten to talk about that we got to touch on, and I was really excited.
Yeah, we still get new designers brings new perspective on the design process, and it's interesting to see how different like designers approach designing a new game or even a rewrite of a game, right?
Well, and I think this is interesting too, because this is one where, it was sort of a design team, which is definitely a different process than someone designing a game on their own. And then like this being a redesign of a previous game makes it a little bit different. But I thought that Sean gave such really like deep and thoughtful answers to every question that we asked. It was such a good chat. I feel like I learned a lot during that portion.
A ton, especially like coming from a company like Evil Hat, seeing the playtesting or hearing about the playtesting process from a company that like focuses on making games is fascinating. Like, oh, we just did 6 hours of like 3 different game playtests, and we've been playtesting like every week since, and like 12 iterations, number 13 got us there. It's like, that's a lot of work for a single person, but like a company can definitely afford to do that, right?
Yeah, it definitely changes the way that you go about those things. Yeah, so I'm really glad that we got to have some of that discussion here, and it does only get better, and we expound on it more a lot, later on. But it was so much fun to talk about.
It was, absolutely.
Before we let you go for the day, here are our calls to action updates. Action news now updates. Okay, we need like a little like beep, 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 beep. Yeah, we need that. I know we have like our calls to action, but like we need like a little newsreel.
There you go.
Now we're going to talk about how we're trying to make our episodes shorter.
I know, right? Certainly. Well, one of the things that we hear about the show a lot is, and something that we've been struggling to do anything about, was our long episode lengths. Some series are a lot longer than others, and some games just take a lot longer because of the nature of character creation for those games.
Sometimes people tell you not to make 5 different characters, and you do it anyway.
It's true. It's true. That's called nuance, Amelia. And we cover games at a much more nuanced level, at the character creation level, than most podcasts would do, I believe. So we really don't have much fluff to cut out the way we present things. Yeah. So that led to very long episodes. So going forward, you're going to start to notice that our series will be expanded into about at least 4 episodes a month, most likely 4 for the most part, for every series. And we'll be trying to keep the episodes between 30 minutes an hour, with like 45 minutes being kind of the sweet spot for an episode length.
Definitely.
Which should be a lot less daunting for folks to jump in on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, obviously a lot of our series are pretty self-contained. So, you know, new people really can jump in anywhere. But I also know a lot of people are completionists and you want to know all of the things. And again, it's feedback. It's a thing that's bothered me personally for a while because I don't like long podcast episodes. I like one that it's like, I can listen to this in one drive somewhere or there and back, you know, which some of our episodes are too long for that. And so, and it is a feedback that we've gotten from other podcasting professionals too. So I think the other thing is that, you know, we want to be able to do Character Evolution Cast. And, you know, that was filling that 4th spot for a long time. And unfortunately, life has just, there's been a lot of burnout for us lately trying to do more. So I think we're going to kind of try to make that like on those those months where there are 5 weeks, we want to try and maybe do a Character Evolution Cast in there. I don't know. We'll be messing around with it for a little bit. So, but it also should leave less of a gap between series. You won't have, you know, a week or 2 weeks or whatever where you don't have things. And then, you know, we won't have those huge, long discussion block episodes. So we would love to hear feedback, of course, especially from, you know, the people that have been with us this whole time. You know, let us know if this like feels really awkward, if you really enjoy it, if you like the sort of like snappier episodes. We have a Discord. It's discord.charactercreationcast.com where you can join and you can let us know your thoughts. You can get a hold of us in multiple ways at contact.charactercreationcast.com. We would love to hear from you and to know if this is working for you, if it's really not working for you, even if it's just to say, hey guys, I appreciate the effort.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to try to keep these calls to action after this episode a bit snappier as well. Okay,
sorry, I'm trying.
I know. Well, no, because we have the announcements to talk about here, and this is something new. So this will probably be our only like in-episode announcement about this. But honestly, just let us know. We'd love to hear from you. And moving on to our actual calls to action. Aside from all of that, if you do like what you are hearing and you want to support the show, and you can head on over to Patreon at patreon.com/charactercreationcast and sign up for any of our basic tiers as a free trial, and check out all of the non-physical rewards at that level for free for 7 days. Each level has a ton of great rewards associated with it. The Sticker of the Month Club is one of my favorite levels. At $10, you get stickers sent to you every single month that usually is in theme with the series that we're covering from that month. You can get some custom C3 dice and personalized thank you cards from Amelia for $5 and up, as well as chit chats every week that we're able to do them for $1 and up. And hopefully soon we'll be able to get back into those more frequently.
Yeah, we were doing them every week. And then again, life just really lifed hard at us.
Yep.
So we want to be doing, the ideal goal is weekly. So we're working on it.
Yes, absolutely.
And we also like to thank all of our patrons personally every episode. And in the spirit of keeping our episodes shorter, we're going to group by 3 now. That's new and exciting.
Yeah.
So let's get started. We are really glad to have you, Lieutenant DJG, aka Tigranosaurus, and Eric Bontz. Thanks for supporting us.
Thank you to Daryl Holiday II, Shadim Cabal, and the Shyest Barbarian.
Benjamin Sweeney, Lorcan McGinnis, and Rob Fletcher, thank you so much.
Thank you, Kevin Brown, Tentacle Duck, and Cole McCallum. We couldn't do this without you.
Carlos Salazar, John Adamus, and the yodeling Yemenis eating yesterday's yellow Uachins and their yeoman Yochinists. Thank you for your continued support.
Eric S., Ian Potmeyer, and Sorigoth, Thanks for making this all possible.
Liam G., Brian Colm, and the Garden GM, we are so happy to have you here with us. Thank you.
Tanglefoot, Blue Kryptonite, and Danny, we're happy to have you here with us as well. Thank you.
Nicole Trainer, Liam Murray, and Kenning, we can't thank you enough, but we're going to keep trying anyway, every week.
Brian Kurtz, Mark E. Fair, and Drew Owen, you rock. Thank you. And thank you to all of our future patrons. Your support is helping keep the lights on for the show. Every bit of support here helps tremendously, and we are incredibly grateful to all of you. If you are already supporting the Patreon or can't afford to do so right now and still want to show your support for the show, the next best way to do that is to leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Podchaser, Podcast Addict, or even Facebook. And we'll read your review right here and thank you personally the episode after we get the review. So if you get it in now, it'll be at the top of the pile.
That's all we have for today's episode. Join us next episode where we get to the character creation and make some truly epic heroes. But until then, take care, everyone. Stay safe, drink some water, and keep making those amazing people. We'll see you next time. Thank you for joining us for part 1 of this character creation series. We'll be back in part 2, picking up right where we left off.
Character Creation Cast is a production of the One Shot Podcast Network and can be found online at www.charactercreationcast.com. Head to the website to get more information on our hosts, this show, and even our press kit. Character Creation Cast can also be found on Twitter and Blue Sky at CreationCast, or on our Discord server at discord.charactercreationcast.com. I'm one of your hosts, Ryan Bolter, and I can be found on Twitter and Blue Sky at Lord Neptune or online at lordneptune.com. Our other host, Amelia Antrim, can be found on Twitter and Blue Sky at Ginger Reckoning. Music for this episode is used with a Creative Commons license or with permission from the podcast they originated from. Further information can be found within the show notes. Our main theme music is Hero Remix by Steve Combs and is used with a Creative Commons license. This podcast is owned by us under Creative Commons. This episode was edited by Ryan Bolter. Further information for the game systems used and today's guests can also be found in the show notes. If you'd like to support our show, find us on Patreon. Get access to bonus episodes, exclusive merch, and much more at patreon.com/charactercreationcast. Thanks for joining us. And remember, we find that the best part of any role-playing game is character creation. So go out there and create some amazing people. We'll see you next time.